Stay tuned this Friday. I have an interview with Fluffy Pony of Monero. All you need to know about all the ins and outs. Why Monero is the best privacy coin around. Stay tuned. Hey, what's up everybody? It's Levi Hillis here. Thanks again for watching and welcome to my new subscribers. So if you're new to my channel, I'm bringing you cryptocurrency news in an educated kind of way, so it's easy for you to digest. So it's not always that serious, but today it's gonna be a little bit serious, guys, because I have an interview with Fluffy Pony of Monero. And for me, I'm always, been a supporter of Monero. As you look at my previous video, I spread my portfolio in different kind of coins, and Monero is one of them. One of the reasons is that I seriously do not trust governments. I mean, it's a good thing that the Japanese government has, let's say, made a law for cryptocurrencies, but it gives alarm bells ring if a government's gonna approve these kind of things, because with regulations, more regulations come on top, and in the end, what happens? And then it's good that you can, have a coin that brings you real privacy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And first of all, I need to apologize. So I'm sorry, guys. Or is it too late now to say sorry? Because this video is gonna be a long video. So normally my videos are around, let's say, 2 minutes to 8 minutes, but this will be a 35-minute video. But if you want to know all the ins and outs about Monero, I would suggest you watch. So let's go! So guys, as mentioned earlier in my video, I have a special guest today. So I'm here with Riccardo Spagni. Do I pronounce your name correctly, Riccardo?
Yep, that's correct. Spagni, yeah.
Good. So welcome to my channel, and thanks for having me. Thanks for having you, let's say. So can you do a little bit of a short introduction of yourself, Riccardo?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm Riccardo Spagni, although many people know me as Fluffy Pony or Fluffy Pony ZA on Twitter and Reddit. And I am the lead maintainer for Monero, and that's kind of one of the hats that I wear. And I also have a few startups. One does payment processing and a couple of other things that I do. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay, good. Okay, so let me do a short introduction of myself as well, because we have only been in contact via mail, and I guess one of the first contacts that we had was with me asking how to import a paper wallet into my Monero. So just to give you a short introduction, so basically I'm working as a digital marketing consultant, and I mainly focus on big corporates, and I have my own company in that. And yeah, for me, the most important thing is that I can let's say, secure my family and my kids for a year, and every else above that I invest in particular kind of things. So I also do, let's say, investing in commodities, and a couple of years I've been investing in cryptocurrency. I'm not a very technical guy, so that's why I get, let's say, the right stakeholders there to give me that information, and also the information to my viewers. So basically, yeah, that's the way I see cryptocurrency. I really see it as a big potential, especially with let's say the geopolitical situations that are going on, and also, let's say, the artificial way that the fiat monetary system is being kept up. So in my opinion, privacy is a very important thing, and there is a lot of focus on any other coins, but I have a feeling people do not understand why the privacy aspect is so important. So today I've invited for you guys Mr. Riccardo Spagni, aka Fluffy Pony. So before we continue to the serious stuff, Riccardo, so where does the name Fluffy Pony come from?
Well, I was christened Fluffy Pony by two people that I worked with many years ago. And initially, I tried to ignore it, and I thought that it would go away because it was a silly nickname.
Mhm.
And after them just using it at the office, using it in emails, I just sort of caved and decided, well, I'm stuck with it, so I might as well embrace it.
Yeah, good. The same goes for me. So basically, I go by the name of the famous DJ. It doesn't make sense in the crypto world at all, but I used to be a DJ, and the friends of mine called me like the famous DJ, and I just kept it. I was too lazy to change my YouTube name to to a YouTube name that has more resonation with cryptocurrency. So I kept it with the famous DJ. Okay, good.
Nice.
So can you give us a little bit of history of how Monero started? What is the mission, vision?
Sure. So Monero wasn't launched by me. It was launched by a guy called Thankful for Today at the beginning of 2014, April 2014. And initially, it was just meant as a fair relaunch of the CryptoNote reference code, which only existed as Bytecoin, which was like 80% pre-mined. And Thankful for Today didn't really know how to play well with the community. And so after he kind of rejected what the community wanted to do, the community forked the project away from him. So I was one of the 7 people that forked it away. And so my role is I'm part of the Monero core team, and really all we do is just control the GitHub repository and the domains. And then my separate role is as the lead maintainer. So I just merge pull requests. I mean, the vision is really sort of to be the best pro privacy cryptocurrency that we can be as a base, and then to build on top of that. But ultimately, the community dictates the vision, not us.
Yeah. Okay. And what is in your view why the privacy aspect is of such an importance?
I think for a number of reasons. The first is that targeted crime against people with cryptocurrency holdings is already a thing, and it's going to become worse. I mean, it's largely untargeted at the moment because it's just malware that tries to steal wallets and that sort of stuff. But, if somebody knows how much you hold in cryptocurrency, then all you're really doing is giving them a reason to come over to your house and beat you over the head with a hammer until you give them your private keys.
Yeah.
So, we've got to take steps to avoid that. And one of them is by creating a store of value that is truly private. And that's really what Monero sets out to achieve.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So people are saying that the privacy feature will be a common feature for coins, and there are other coins that are also using that privacy feature, like for instance Zcash or Dash. What is the biggest differentiator with Monero versus these kind of coins?
I think the 2 biggest differentiators, firstly is that Monero's privacy is mandatory.
Yeah.
So you can't opt out of it and be like, well, some of these transactions aren't private and these ones are. And that means that the privacy set grows with each transaction. With each mine block, it just increases and increases. And it also means that even if somebody isn't really familiar with how to securely and safely use Monero, we're still protecting their privacy by virtue of the fact that every transaction is private.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you have opt-in privacy, so non-mandatory privacy, then what you're effectively doing is saying, okay, your privacy isn't that important, and what we're going to do is bundle your privacy down to the small selection of users that actually use the privacy feature. And as we've seen with Zcash and Dash, very few people actually use the privacy stuff if it's not mandatory. So it's kind of pointless. Why even bother with it?
Yeah.
The second important aspect that's critical, or that's specific maybe to Zcash, is that Monero's cryptography is not complicated. It's not hand wavy. It's not moon math. It's relatively easy to understand, even for users who aren't familiar with elliptic curve cryptography. It might not be, and so that sort of thing is good in a cryptographic sense, because you want old tested cryptography. You don't want new cryptography that's just been invented virtually, because that sort of thing leads to implementation errors and ultimately leads to the downfall of systems that are supposed to be protecting our privacy.
Yeah. Okay. And is that how the other coins apply these, like Dash and Zcash? They are using a newer, let's say, way of doing crypto.
Zcash is, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, I mean, again, I have a lot of respect for the work being done in the zero cash and before that the zero coin protocols, but it is too new.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of testing and a lot of groundwork that needs to happen before it can be used in a production system.
Yeah.
Dash doesn't use any fancy cryptography, but ultimately stuff like CoinJoin is fundamentally flawed because of the Sybil attack vector,
Yeah.
and anything that can be Sybil attacked, to try and prevent Sybil attacks is immensely difficult. It's a challenge that cryptographers have tried to overcome or deal with for decades, and Bitcoin is one of the first things that presents incentives in a particular way that overcomes Sybil attacks, or at least makes them overly expensive and overly costly. Whereas pretty much all the CoinJoin implementations today haven't really found a way to work around the Sybil attack vectors, where anyone can just set up fake accounts and participate in the mixing process. And that's sort of where that falls down.
Clear. Okay, so a lot of coins have, let's say, a fixed uh, coin emission or coin supply. What do you foresee in terms of potential risk or issues with that in the future?
I think that that by and large, we don't really know what is the correct approach or what is the approach that will have the most longevity. But with Monero, we don't have a fixed supply because, well, one of the reasons is that we aren't convinced that, at least in Monero's model, miners will continue to mine after the block reward gets too small, and assuming fees aren't high enough. We also we don't really want to create a scenario where a fee market is required just to incentivize miners. So we have a slightly different approach to Bitcoin's incentive model there. Again, we don't know which one is right, which one is wrong. Maybe they're both correct. Maybe they both will work. But it's just a slightly different approach to Bitcoin's, where our incentives will be or are the block reward, and that will be the incentive forever. There's an added incentive for miners to include transactions because of the transaction fee, but the transaction fee never needs to compete, and unless it's sort of during times of lots of bursty transactions. So maybe during like Black Friday when everyone's sending money around, that's sort of where transaction fee or transaction fee competition might exist for a brief period. But in general, the block reward is the thing that incentivizes miners.
Yeah, and how many coins will ultimately be mined, and then there is that tail emission. Can you tell a little bit more
So
in detail about how that works?
sure. So
Yeah,
basically, once we get down to 0.6 Monero per block, and we have 2-minute blocks, then that's the base reward, and the reward will never go below that. And that will happen in, I need to check, but I think it happens in 2022 or so,
yeah,
somewhere around there.
yeah,
And then it just sort of stays fixed at that amount every like annually. So the amount of coins that are emitted annually will be roughly the same every year,
yeah.
which means that from that point the inflation will be around 0.8% annually, but then it decreases obviously every year because you've got the same amount of
Yeah,
coins being
exactly.
emitted, and so it slowly tends towards zero.
Yeah. That's still less than what's currently happening in the current
Yeah,
financial world, of course. Okay,
yeah.
good. Yeah, at Bitcoin, there is for years already that block size debate going on. So, should we worry about this with Monero? On Monero's end, let's
Well,
say, sorry. Yeah,
Well, with Monero, we have a dynamic block size limit. So basically as Monero is used more and there is an increase in the number of transactions that are included per block, the block size grows slightly higher than the limit. And because the limit is based on the median over the past set of blocks, then eventually by miners slightly growing it, the median increases, and then they're able to slightly grow it even more, assuming there's enough demand, assuming there's, the mempool has transactions to do that. And so eventually over time, there's no real limit in the block size, except what is naturally limited by, bandwidth and that sort of thing. But there's the limit doesn't grow or sink fast enough to allow too much abuse. So a miner can stuff transactions into the block into blocks to try and artificially grow it, but they're not going to be able to sustain that very long unless they have a massive portion of the hash rate, which they should never have. And so they're basically just going to be shoving transactions into the blockchain for no real purpose. And so basically what should and what will happen and what is happening is the block size slowly grows over time, or the block size limit grows. And then if there's a drop in usage, so, maybe there's an increase over, over Black Friday, for example, block size increases. And then as that demand goes back to normal after that, the block size decreases again back to whatever is a usual limit.
Yeah, so it's dynamically. Okay, good. But
Yeah.
I also read a while ago that there are also penalties, or how should I interpret that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the model basically means that if a miner tries to grow
Okay,
the block size too quickly, they try to mine blocks that are too large, then they will lose out on the block reward. So miners are incentivized to grow blocks, but only a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, good. So in terms of user adoption, so to have, let's say, Monero being used by, the mainstream, my mother, my grandmother, or my little son, who's actually too young. But let's see, when I first started with Monero and buying it, I was using Simple Wallet, and I do have a little bit of technical knowledge, so I know how to work a little bit with MS-DOS or with Linux or in the kernel. But how would it be possible for the, let's say, for the average Joe to use Monero?
Well, it's something that we're working on. So as an example, something that we created is a system called Open Alias, and that allows you to pay with Monero and with Bitcoin to email style addresses. So you can send money to rick@spagni.net using Monero. You can also use URL style addresses. So you can send donations to donate.getmonero.org. And in Electrum and in the Monero clients, they all know how to interpret that as, and how to decode that into an actual address. So that's an example of ways that we're trying to make Monero easier to use. We also have a graphical client, a GUI client that we introduced, or we launched in December last year, and we've now just recently released beta 2 of it. And that's pretty easy to use. It does run a full node on your computer, so it is somewhat heavy from that perspective. But there are things that we're doing, that we're working on, and various companies and organizations and third-party contributors are working on ways to external clients that are lighter clients and can connect to like a remote node, for example, that you run at home.
Yeah.
So there's things that we're doing. It's still early days. Monero is still a very young currency, but there are things that we're doing to try and enable people to use Monero in a manner that is a lot simpler than it currently is.
Yeah, and where are these strategic plans coming from to have it, let's say, broadly adopted? Are that also coming from the lead developers, or where does it come from?
No, it pretty much comes from the community.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big believer. I want Monero to be used. It's the only time that it's got purpose is if it's being used.
True.
So I'm a big believer in increasing adoption. At the same time, I don't think there's any value or much value in doing paid for marketing and that sort of thing, because ultimately, well, on the one hand, Monero is very young and, like we've just discussed, lacks the tooling to enable people to use Monero very easily. And then on the other hand, you have this problem that that sort of doing paid for marketing attracts people that won't really understand how and why Monero works. So I think that we've got quite a good grassroots level community that's being built up. And I suspect that in future there will be organizations that will do things like, put up a billboard or whatever, to increase adoption. But that will be something that external parties do in order to increase adoption of Monero.
Yeah.
As a core team and as a group of contributors, our focus is really on building out the parts of Monero that make Monero easy to use, secure, and private, not really going and doing marketing or lobbying for users.
Yeah. Okay, so for people new into crypto, what is the best way? I know it is a difficult question, but what's the best way to, let's say, keep your Monero safe? Is it safe enough to keep it in your simple wallet or on my Monero?
So it depends on if you're using or you have Monero to use it or you have Monero in storage. If you want to use Monero on a regular basis, then the GUI wallets or simple wallets the command line wallets are both equally safe. And because you run a full node behind those, you are basically validating and verifying that you are on the connected to the Monero network and you have the same consensus as the rest of the network. So that's really secure if you want to use Monero on the regular. My Monero is okay for very small amounts of Monero if you just want to play or if you're sort of hopping in between things. But I would not store large amounts of Monero on my Monero at all. If you want to store large amounts of Monero, as like a private store of value, then you can use something like moneroaddress.org to generate a Monero address and mnemonic and private keys offline. And there's instructions on moneroaddress.org as to how to do that. There's also, not right now, but what are they called? Ledger are busy working on adding Monero support to the Ledger wallets, and that will also add a degree of safety to all the clients that allow you to use Monero in conjunction with those wallets.
And that's already in the pipeline with Ledger?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Ledger are very excited about it and they've been building it out for a while. It's a lot of work and they have a lot of stuff on their plate, but they're busy working on it.
And I just want to jump in, guys, on the my Monero address, because I've also using that for, let's say, storing my Moneros. And one time I was too lazy, or I don't know what happened, and I forgot to write out my mnemonic sheet. So I lost some 80 Moneros somewhere. So be careful, don't let the same happen to you. Yes. Okay, so now another question with regards also about, let's say, whenever you have used or generated a paper wallet via my Monero address, and you run it into Simple Wallet into my Monero, and you use your private key, let's say, is it important to swap it? And why is it important to swap it? Or is it not important to swap it?
So pretty much the minute you import that paper wallet's private key or that cold storage wallet's private key into something like the Monero command line wallet or the GUI wallet or my Monero, you're basically taking it from cold storage to hot storage. And the minute it's in hot storage, you have to assume that it might be compromised. And even if it's not compromised today, and you delete the wallet or something like that, there might be remnants of it on your system. There might be that an attacker has stolen the private key already, but you just don't know about it, and he's only going to touch it later on. So, the minute you turn it into hot storage, then you have to assume that it's going to be compromised, and you would want to then move subsequent funds out to a new cold storage address that you've created. You wouldn't want to continue to use that address as cold storage once you've turned it into hot.
Exactly. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, now some speculative kind of questions. So I heard that, well, I saw that you had a presentation at Coinbase. What are the rumors of that? Is Monero coming to Coinbase? Or can you not tell
I have
anything?
no idea. And I have no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
I mean, it's like they're excited about Monero. They really like Monero, but I mean, whether that actually turns into anything depends very much on regulators
exactly.
and on how regulators view Monero.
Yeah. So another speculative question. So basically, what I see is that since the beginning of Q3 2016, the price of Monero is in the upward trends. Every quarter it reaches a new, let's say, high peak. Where do you think that the trend is coming from?
I mean, I try not to pay too much attention to price.
Okay.
I guess that well, at least I hope it's from people using Monero, and we've seen an increase, a continued increase in transaction volume, and normally that increase in transaction volume is indicative of people actually using Monero and not just people holding it speculatively.
Yeah. Okay. And what kind of global trends do you see? Why it would be interesting for people to move to Monero?
Um, I think that some of the things that we're seeing more and more on a global basis are things like the war against cash.
Exactly.
And also things like the collapse of economies, like in Venezuela,
Yeah.
where the local currency suddenly becomes virtually worthless,
Yeah.
and it becomes better for people living in that economy to move their funds into, or at least move a portion of their funds into a private store of value like Monero, or a store of value like Bitcoin. So some of those things that we're seeing lead to an increase in Monero. We're also seeing an increase in blockchain tracing systems, and we've even recently seen some arrests in parts of Europe where the police relied on blockchain tracing systems to figure out what people were doing with Bitcoin and with other currencies. And so the more this happens, the more Monero becomes interesting to people that want to protect their privacy.
Yeah. Okay. And what are your view on, let's say, the last days has been a little bit hectic on the market. There has been a shift of positions again. Ripple is back on the third place. Lycon is back on the fourth place. They have been heavily pumped, in my opinion. But where do you think that move is coming from?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I don't, again, I'm not a
Yeah,
big price watcher. And I think that obviously there's a lot of or a lot of manipulation in the markets because cryptocurrency markets are tiny. We think that they're big,
yeah,
but they're actually really small. And they're trivial to manipulate. I mean, you've got holders that have got a few thousand Bitcoin, and using that, they can shift the market up and down like substantially. And by sort of setting bar or setting various price points and orders, they're able to create the idea that there is a lot of demand, and then as the currency starts to spike, they're able to get out quite quickly with a profit, and a whole bunch of people are still trying to buy because they have FOMO and they think that this is a pump that's going to continue forever. And we're seeing a lot of that, like these pumps that then end up dumping later on. And it's sad, but I mean, market manipulation is inevitable.
exactly. And just for you guys that do not know what FOMO is, that is fear of missing out. And I also have that sometimes. Okay, so what are the future plans? Will the main focus always be on privacy, or are you guys working on new USPs as well for Monero?
The focus is always going to be on privacy, scalability, and usability. With all of the things I mean, there's lots of plans that we have to add to build out things like trust and identity systems, a Namecoin like DNS system, all sorts of things like that. But with all of this, we're not going to build out a system unless we can continue to keep it private or pro privacy. So privacy is always going to be a focus, and also with scalability. It's
Yeah.
pointless building out a system that collapses after you have 5 users.
Yeah, okay, good. So I'm out of questions. Is there any last thing that we have not covered in this interview that you would like to share with my viewers whenever it comes to the things that need to be mentioned about Monero and what we missed out in terms of clarifying the privacy or any other aspect, Ricardo?
I think the only thing is Monero is a currency that's only really useful if it's being used. And so I would sort of implore people that if they are interested in Monero, if they want to enhance their privacy, don't treat Monero as a speculative asset. Treat it as something useful. Treat it as something that you can use, whether that use is as a private store of value or you want to use it as a temporary store of value for Bitcoin purchases, whatever it is, like use Monero, because the more it's used, the greater the anonymity set, the greater everyone's privacy, including your own, and the more useful is Monero the more useful Monero is to everyone else.
Great, 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 great. Well, thank you very much, Ricardo. Thank you for your time, and thank you for having you in my channel, because there are some others right there that are a little bit cocky that didn't want to do an interview with me yet because I didn't have so much subscribers yet. But Ricardo showed that it doesn't matter. He just wants to bring the message. He's passionate about Monero, and thank you very much, Ricardo. I wish you a good weekend.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.